Welcome back to Tea for Me, please. Today I'm joined by Poorvi of Herbs and Kettle Tea. She's really an expert in Indian tea, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to get to talk about all the different Indian tea regions and what the teas from there taste like. Thanks for joining me, Poorvi.
Thank you for inviting me, Nicole. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So I know Darjeeling, typically we think of as black tea, but there's definitely a lot of diversity there too.
hmm
So, in a lot of different regions, and they all really have something different to offer. So I think probably the most famous one would probably be Assam. That I
Yes.
think that's kind of like your classic, even just like your English breakfast. That's typically what you're drinking.
Yeah. And so I'd like to, it's easy to compare, and I'd like to compare Darjeeling with Assam because people are aware of these two regions. And then we can talk about the different regions in India. And so Assam is the lowlands, and Darjeeling is the foothills of the Himalayas. And so there's definitely a difference in geography. So when you talk about terroir, you're talking about latitude, you're talking about altitude, and then also with rivers, lakes, the type of soil, and also the cultivar that grows in the region or the variety of Camellia sinensis. So, the latitude's almost the same, where it's in the tropics. But what is different is that Assam is in the lowlands, and Darjeeling is in the foothills of the Himalayas. So you can get an altitude of close to 5,000 to 5,500 feet in the higher regions. And this creates more of a subtropic environment. And so going back to this, Assam, only the Camellia sinensis assamica is able to survive in Assam, while Darjeeling is able to grow both the Camellia sinensis as well as assamica. But most of the teas that we drink from Darjeeling are the sinensis variety. And so this is because of the altitude, which creates a subtropic climate. And so the sinensis plant is able to survive as compared to Camellia sinensis assamica, which can grow in both environments, but the sinensis variety cannot really handle the low altitude as well as the more tropical environment. So when you talk about Assam, you have this large river, the Brahmaputra, that flows through Assam, and it creates a lot of mineral content in the soil. So when you think of Assam teas, you're talking of a richer mouthfeel, a mineral texture, and then they're more malty. And yes, we do think of English breakfast as a traditional Assam or a CTC, but a lot of the smaller tea growers are now, growing and manufacturing a lot of orthodox, really high quality whole leaf teas, and that's what Herbs and Kettles is trying to showcase. Is these teas are great; they can be steeped using gong fu methods. But again, going back, Assam, even though you're using a whole leaf tea, you will get a malty, rich mouthfeel. As compared to when you go to Darjeeling, it's higher altitude. There are rivers and few lakes, but nothing as big as the Brahmaputra. And the soil's also different. It's more loamy. The altitude creates a few effects, like the rainfall just kind of flows through, and so it doesn't really get the tea plants don't get waterlogged, and also the altitude creates more of a nippy environment, and so it's more harder for the tea plants to grow. And so when they're stressed, as you know, they have more aromas and flavors. And so when you think of a Darjeeling tea, it's more it's lighter, like maybe a champagne. That's why it's called the champagne of teas. But it's actually, lighter, fruitier aromas, the muscatel flavor in the summer. And traditionally, these teas are had without milk or sugar. So you enjoy Darjeeling teas by itself, and then they have nuanced aromas and flavors. And this is a lot to do with the altitude, the Camellia sinensis variety, and the fact that the mountainous region creates this microclimate. So you have clouds. So there is like a lot of cloud cover. So there's more theanine content. There's a brothy feeling to these teas. So yeah, that's the primary difference between Assam and Darjeeling when it comes to the varietal of tea plant as well as the terroir. And then this information can be kind of extrapolated and taken to the rest of the Indian regions. And so when you talk about Nilgiris down south, they again on a high altitude. So although they're in the tropics, it creates this subtropical climate. And so again, the Camellia sinensis variety does well. And then the aromas and flavors can be similar to our Darjeeling. And we were recently in Meghalaya, which is at a lower altitude than Darjeeling, but has a similar microclimate with hills, the lake, the Umiam Lake. And so, again, the Camellia sinensis variety does very well in Meghalaya. And it's surprising, but Meghalaya teas taste very similar to our Darjeeling. So yeah, it's what I really enjoy the diversity of teas in India, and a lot of to do. I think about 60 to 70% of the mouthfeel, the aromas and flavors are definitely from the terroir where the tea grows.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's so interesting to me that one type of plant can be so different, grown in different places. I know, I always wondered about like why would the Assamica plant not do well, in other places, or the Sinensis variety do well in a much warmer climate like in Assam. But I have a tea plant, and it's a variety that's grown in Russia, so it's used to a very colder
Oh,
environment. It hates the
uh-huh.
summer here so much. It becomes very dramatic and like flops over. It's just not happy at all when the weather's hot. So I can imagine that that's what would happen, is why the Assamica does so much better in those climates. That it's just
Yeah,
really better suited.
definitely. So yeah, when the British colonized India and they were getting into the tea trade, they stole some Camellia sinensis variety from China, and they got it initially to Assam, and the tea plant didn't flourish. And that's when they took it to the hills. The tea plant did really well there, and that started the commercialization of tea in India.
Definitely. And it's super interesting too, because Darjeeling was really started as a hill station to give people a respite from the heat as well. That's kind of why the tea does better there too. That, initially it was set up as for the British soldiers to get away from the heat a little bit.
Yeah, but it is tea.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the one thing I do want to our trip was really interesting. We just had a recent trip to India, and we came across a lot of wild tea trees in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. And it was interesting because this whole northeast is connected to the Yunnan province in Myanmar. And there's the germplasm is pretty active in this area. And so there's a lot of mutations, but also it shows that this whole terroir is very similar, and wild tea trees didn't only originate in China. They also have their origins in India, and so tea traditions and tea production has been taking place in India way before British colonized India and made it commercial. And so we were able to meet a couple of tribes. One was the Singpo tribe, and the other was the Tangsa tribe from Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh. And so when we met them, were in their backyards, and we were able to see these wild tea trees. And they still practice some of the traditions of making the falap and kalap, which are traditions that they've been practicing for the last hundreds of years. And it's nice to see that they still carry that on now.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think it's very little known that happened. That there's definitely tea grown before the British, colonized India. I had the pleasure of trying your tea from Nagaland, and it was so interesting to try that it really reminded me so much more of pour than it did of like what you would think of as an Indian tea. But it
Yeah.
definitely makes sense that they have that connection.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, the tribe in China is called Xingpo, And the same, their cousins in India are called Singpo, and the Singpo still make their traditional bamboo tea, and the Singpo make falaf. So there's definitely this connection, this brotherhood, and hearing them talk, they still consider themselves as one big family. So it's really adorable that even though there's boundaries, tea and just love don't know any boundaries. So it's lovely to hear that, and I was very honored to be part of these conversations with the Singpo tribe.
That's amazing. I really love hearing about that experience. And it's definitely, I think, important to remember that tea is, a plant, and it's, human boundaries don't apply to things like that, that, you know,
Yeah, definitely, and especially for us tea lovers, like there are no boundaries.
definitely. Yeah. I know, Assam and Darjeeling are definitely two of the most popular or like best well-known regions, but there's
Hmm.
definitely some smaller regions as well. I know
Yes.
like Manipur is one that I know
Uh-huh.
I've tried a wonderful tea from you from.
Yeah, definitely. So Manipur also has wild tea trees, and some cultivated ones too. But we've been fortunate to work with a cooperative in Manipur that supports the local villagers, and these villagers know the location of these tea trees, and it's pretty much a secret. But the cooperative is incentivizing the villagers to go and pluck tea. They've taught them how to make the tea. So Manipur is coming along. There's other regions like Arunachal Pradesh, which also has hills and mountains. It shares its boundary with Burma, now known as Myanmar, and Mizoram is also coming has its own tea plantations that are uh, 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 growing, as well as the Kangra district. So Kangra district is more now eastwards, again in the Himalayas, and there are a few tea growers there. So tea is definitely spreading its love, as well as a lot of tea plantations and small tea growers are beginning to grow as well as manufacture tea. And so, what started as a few states is now becoming multiple states which are growing tea. Some are doing it as a commodity, some are doing it more as a way of spreading joy and improving the conditions of their village. And some of the small tea growers also very innovative. So tea is, I would say, at a cusp in India, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool tea and different types of teas that we will experience over time.
Definitely. And that's something that's really excited me as a tea lover is, I love, traditional teas that have always been kind of the way they are. But it's really cool to also see new and interesting things coming from, a region that you already know. Like I know, like
Yeah,
I've
definitely.
definitely tried some really interesting oolongs from Darjeeling, and white teas also. So I think we're definitely going to be seeing some really interesting teas that kind of are outside of the usual box.
Yes, and we carry some of them. So we have like a Darjeeling white peony. It's surprisingly very buttery and flowery, so similar to the Baimudan. And we also have a silver needle that we carry from Meghalaya. And even you talking about the silver needle, like I tried the silver needle from Darjeeling, from Assam, as well as from Meghalaya. And so the Assam was slightly bolder and it had like a chocolate note. The Darjeeling one, interestingly, was more grassy, and I think it's just it was a very high altitude for Silver Needle, and maybe some of it could be with the terroir, some of it could be the manufacturing conditions of the tea grower that I tried it from, and then I finally settled on the Silver Needle from Meghalaya, which I found was the most floral, vegetal kind of where I wanted it, and so yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that terroir manufacturing, changes in manufacturers can make such a big difference to tea.
Definitely, and I can attest that I really, really love your silver needle. So I'm drinking some of that right now.
Thank you.
I've reviewed some of these teas before on my blog, so I'll be make sure to link those in the description, so that way you can all check those out as well.
Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me here
No
today.
problem. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and love of tea with us.